Good afternoon, I'm Shane Masters with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. The Safety Committee of the European Medicines Agency EMA has found that the Oxford Astrazeneca Covid-19 vaccine can cause unusual blood clots with low blood platelets, but it stressed that the overall benefits of the vaccine in preventing coronavirus outweighs the risks of side effects. The agency says healthcare professionals and people receiving the vaccine are to remain aware of the possibility of very rare cases of blood clots within 2 weeks of vaccination. Most of the cases reported have occurred in women under 60 years of age within 2 weeks of vaccination. Based on the currently available evidence, specific risk factors have not been confirmed. Meanwhile, the UK's vaccine advisory body says under 30s are to be offered an alternative COVID jab to the Astrazeneca vaccine due to the mounting evidence linking it to rare blood clots. A review by the drugs regulator MHRA found by the end of March 79 people in the UK suffered rare blood clots after vaccination, 19 of whom died. The regulator said this was not proof the jab had caused the clots, but it said that the link was getting firmer. At least one health expert has called for a total lockdown for the upcoming weekend. Dr. Alveston Bailey believes curfew at noon on Saturdays is not enough. Since then, there have been mixed views among Jamaicans. With the second weekend of lockdown behind us and another to go, there have been mixed reactions to the measures imposed by the government to curb the spread of COVID-19. Professor of Public Health at the University of Technology, Dr. Alveston Bailey, said the half-day curfew on Saturdays could prove to be counterproductive and has called for a total lockdown on weekends. But head of the Medical Association of Jamaica, Dr. Andrew Manning, believes the country is not in a position to make that move.
We don't have the social net here currently to say, well, let's do a total lockdown and government will distribute food parcels and drink and so on to a wide swath of the population.
Public commentator Dennis Jung says the government is not doing enough to ensure persons adhere to the COVID-19 protocols.
Enforcement needs to be stepped up. We've failed to enforce as a state, and that is why we're where we are today. I mean, parties have been booming. We know this.
On Saturdays, the curfew starts at noon, causing crowds as people do last-minute shopping. Mr. Chung wants the government to consider more time for buyers.
One of the things I think would make more sense is to have a longer period for people to do their business so that you don't have the density of persons.
417 people have been hospitalized due to the respiratory illness COVID-19. Of that, 37 are critically ill, while 42 are moderately ill. This is an increase of 29 from Monday, where 388 cases were reported. Meanwhile, 9 more Jamaicans have died from COVID-19. These include 2 from Westmoreland, Clarendon, St. James, Kingston and St. Andrew, and 1 from St. Mary. Their ages range from 47 to 98 years. This brings the death toll to 631. In the meantime, 72 new cases of the coronavirus were recorded on Tuesday from 181 tests. The number of confirmed cases now stands at 41,400. Kingston and St. Andrew recorded most of the new cases with 36, followed by St. Catherine with 11 and St. James with 6. Meanwhile, there are 22,033 active cases. Use ends after COVID ends. That suggestion from Councillor of the Spring Gardens Division in St. James regarding the ECommerce National Delivery System ends. Dwight Crawford, who is also the spokesperson for the ENDS program in that parish, says more than 30 companies have registered in the St. James pilot. He believes that based on the success so far, ENDS can be used in other situations after the COVID pandemic.
We have times when areas are curfewed and various things take place, not only from a COVID perspective, but even for the crime fight. I believe personally, and I'm just speaking in my own thoughts here, that this could be even used during those times, because many times you hear residents complaining that they've locked down the areas and we're not able to access food and access medication and access, and this platform is a stellar idea.
The ENDS program started 2 weekends ago in Portmore and was extended to the rest of St. Catherine, Kingston and St. Andrew and St. James. It's expected to be extended further for the coming weekend COVID lockdown. Councillor Crawford believes it has kept Jamaica's economy going despite the challenges being experienced in many other countries.
It has forced us, I know things in Jamaica move a lot slower, but it has forced us within a year, within a few months, to start operating more like a first world country, I should say, where we're utilizing these platforms, e-commerce now, and driving our economy, even in times when businesses are closed.
It's being suggested that future national elections could be compromised with the use of information collected through the National Identification System, NIDS, to manipulate voters. Prince Moore has the details.
Making a presentation to the Parliamentary Committee reviewing the NIDS bill yesterday, member of the NIDS Focus Coalition, Matthew McNaughton, said Jamaica could end up with a situation similar to the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which people's social media data were mined to influence election outcomes in several countries. He noted that the bill, as proposed, would allow businesses and other organizations to verify identity using the NIDS. Mr. McNaughton said this will create a treasure trove of data on behavioral patterns such as services used by persons, which could then be mined by political parties.
Not necessarily this government, but the government in power at the time could request from the NERO the transaction logs of all individuals between 30 to 45 to better understand the services that they frequent by this demographic across the multiple constituencies. The impact is that the government could use that information to build a targeted digital and offline strategy and messaging campaign that could shape public perceptions around opposition candidates and the kinds of promises that they would offer if re-elected. And so, again, we see the ways this kind of behavior data is used to manipulate and undermine democracy elsewhere. And we raise this scenario to really hit home that this information will exist in the NERO, and we need to put protections in place around it.
And Mr. McNaughton said the police could also mine this information to build up data sets on people even before approaching a court to get access to the identity of the persons they are tracking. He said safeguards must be put in place to prohibit data mining through the NIDS.
There are a couple ways that it can be treated. The first one is that it should be stated that this information is personal data, because without a clear definition that it is personal data, it may not even necessarily fall under the Data Protection Act, as we've been talking about before. But then secondly, I think, and which we make this recommendation later, we actually think that the processing of this data should be strictly prohibited, and that it should only be prohibited in as much as it enables the enrolled individual to access their own data, but we shouldn't open the door for other third parties, whether in the private sector or in the public sector, to be processing and mining and profiling individuals based on this information.
Prince Moore, TVJ News.
Fire destroyed one of Jamaica's heritage sites earlier this morning, the Balaclava railway station in St. Elizabeth. The blaze razed the 100-plus-year-old building that was repurposed as a furniture shop. Sandy Williams reports.
Fire ravaged the Balaclava railway station in St. Elizabeth about 2 o'clock Wednesday morning. And now, this is what's left of the two-story building: torched zincs and equipment. It's not clear what started the fire. Even though passenger railway service is no longer operated in Jamaica, the property was still being utilized. The station, which was owned by the Jamaica Railway Corporation, was rented to a carpenter in the area. Desmond Salmon says several materials, machine, and tools went up in the flame. He estimates the loss at more than $30 million.
A whole heap of loss, man. whole heap of machine loss in the lumber, furniture. And I got even have one project in there we value over 700,000 on kitchen cupboards, all of that. So we are looking at estimate about 30 million building overall we are talking about.
No one was reported hurt in the blaze. The Santa Cruz fire station was alerted and 2 units responded. However, by the time they arrived at the location, the damage was already done. So only cooling down operation could take place. The Balaclava railway station was one of Jamaica's heritage sites. It was erected around 1892 and was 129 years old. Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News. Stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back. Continuing the news. The Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, has confirmed that an internal probe has begun to determine the reason for a delay in a case involving the beating of a 2-year-old boy at a daycare center in Falmouth, Trelawney. Chief Executive Officer of the CPFSA, Rosalie Gage-Gray, says the lapse is part of its investigation into the incident. The Gleaner reported that the Early Childhood Commission is probing the incident, which took place about a month ago, and that the teacher was suspended and resumed working. This angered the infant's mother, who reported the incident to the police. Mrs. Gage-Gray says the incident was brought to the CPFSA's attention and preliminary steps taken to deal with the matter. However, she acknowledges that the follow-up could have been faster.
Usually, and when we check our records, that's something that we monitor, the response rate. Normally, it is the turnaround is almost within 24 hours, maximum 48 hours, depending on the nature of the case. So we are investigating that internally to see why the NCR officer did not hand over the case. But the officer knew that they can action even before we get that.
There are more signs that the local tourism sector is on the rebound, with nearly 15,000 people visiting Jamaica between the Easter weekend and yesterday. According to preliminary data from the Jamaica Tourist Board, 13,000 visitors entered the island via the Sangster International Airport. Senior strategist in the Ministry of Tourism, Delano Severite, says the figures were the highest since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Given the circumstances of the pandemic, those are actually very good numbers. Many hotels reported very strong occupancies, very high occupancies, despite all the challenges faced. And we also saw a significant number of Jamaicans booked into hotels along the North Coast. It was a very strong weekend, despite all the challenges related to the pandemic.
Mr. Severite expects the recovery to continue.
We're seeing an uptick in interest and an uptick in bookings. The summer is now appearing to look good as more Americans become vaccinated and more citizens in other countries become vaccinated. There's now a strong and growing demand for travel.
Since the start of the year, Jamaica has recorded just over 209,000 visitors. 164,157 were vacationers. Meanwhile, Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett is showing more optimism towards the return of cruise shipping in the island. On Tuesday, Norwegian Cruise Lines announced it will restart service this July with cruises from Jamaica, the Dominican Republic and Greece with the Norwegian Joy, Jade and Gem. Details from Cody and Barrett.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, has given a November timeline for cruise liners to start a phased resumption of operations. This as the world continues to feel the economic impact of COVID-19, especially the tourism sector. But at least one cruise line has already put out its itinerary for its resumption of cruises. Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings says it will begin sailing in July. For Jamaica, the Norwegian Joy will sail 7-day itineraries from Montego Bay starting on August 7. Speaking with our news center on Tuesday, Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says all arrangements have been finalized for the cruise line to home port in Montego Bay, St. James. Mr. Bartlett, however, hastened to point out that arrangements are in place to ensure safety guidelines are followed.
We are comfortable that the requirements so far, and the discussions continue, with our health personnel to make sure that in all elements of the COVID compliance protocol, the crews will meet it. We're satisfied with the discussion so far that the capacity is there and that the resource support is there.
Minister Bartlett is hopeful that the cruise sector could see some level of normalcy soon.
CDC is softening, it seems, their position. They're working through the state of Florida, for example, is very active in getting the CDC to respond more positively to the resumption of cruise. The cruise lines have gone really far out to improve their health and biosanitary arrangements.
The tourism minister says based on discussions with some cruise lines, the possibility is being explored to have vaccines being donated to help in the country's fight against the coronavirus. Codian Barrett, TVJ News.
A $21 million refurbishing program for the Brownstone Market in St. Anne is nearly complete. Work on the facility started 3 weeks ago. We rejoin Codian Barrett for this report.
This is a part of the market not yet touched. It shows a snippet of what the market looked like before local government Minister Desmond McKenzie called for it to be upgraded and allocated $15 million to the refurbishing program. The St. Anne Municipal Corporation found the balance of $6 million. So far, this is the condition of the market, and vendors were excited to restock their stalls.
I'm glad for this opportunity, what I see going on right now. It looks beautiful, clean environment, and you have more people come in and shop as the place is so clean.
There's value going for money, and I like the environment. I like what they are doing. Mr. Hill is respectable to the vendors. He never disrespect nobody. They cover up people things, so no one can be satisfied with what is happening right now in this market.
However, there are concerns from some vendors about whether it will be maintained.
And I will say this to the mayor, whosoever, which administration is in, every 4 years they come and wash down the market. Just wash it down and maintain it. And if them do that, then these money will not have to spend again. As long as them live, they will not have to spend this kind of money again. Keep the market, the environment clean.
They also raised the issue of inadequate sanitation convenience, but according to the mayor, Sidney Stewart, plans are in place.
There's an area that when we complete it would have been left idle, and we decided that we will construct 2 small sanitary conveniences, one male, one female, in that area. Ensure that the people at the lower section of the market don't have to walk the long distances to get to the sanitary convenience. So there's a plan to put that in place for the people in the lower section.
The project is expected to be complete within the next 3 weeks. Codian Barrett, TVJ News.
And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In the next edition of the Health Report, we look at the health benefits of turmeric.
These chronic diseases that we're seeing, hypertension, diabetes, arthritis, cancer, obesity, etc., unless we begin to respond and understand what the people are doing, we will never come to grips with controlling the epidemic of the so-called NCDs. And it is part of this general, cultural science, the cultural application of the people's knowledge. It is that which we need to understand, we need to respect, and we need to put it side by side with what we call the Western-based, evidence-based medicine.
That's the Health Report this evening in Primetime News. And now for today's healthy living tip. How to make turmeric tea. Boil 3 to 4 cups of water on the stove. Add 2 teaspoons of turmeric and stir. Simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes. Strain the tea into another container and pour in a cup, and it's now ready to be consumed.
News now in sports. A provisional team has been named ahead of next month's World Relays despite the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association not yet receiving approval to resume competition. Live track and field returned in February but was shut down again ahead of a 3-weekend lockdown to stem the surge in COVID-19 cases. Karen Madden reports.
After the first 3 editions in the Bahamas and the 2019 staging in Yokohama, Japan, World Relays 2021 will take place in Poland, with the organizers getting approval for the event scheduled for May 1 and 2. Jamaica, ranked number 3 in the world, competed with impressive results in the first 3 editions and moderate returns in 2019, and the country is on course to taking a team to Europe. But that team could be challenged by reduced preparation with competition now on hold. Despite this, technical leader of the national team, Maurice Wilson, told TVJ Sports a provisional team has been named.
So persons with an established track record would be looked at, and even if they would not have opened their season, once they are in good health, they would have been considered. So based on my understanding, a provisional team is being looked at, and by the end of this week, a final team will be selected to meet the deadline in terms of entries.
But with Europe still seeing increases in COVID-19, including a problematic variant strain, we asked the experienced coach whether this could be a deterrent for some athletes and technical staff.
The expectations are that there will be some provision made for those persons who are going to represent Jamaica in order to protect themselves and protect others. So I am not seeing this as a critical issue at this point, because once permission is given for the team to attend the relays based on what has been happening, I think that provisions will be put in place for persons to be able to protect themselves and protect others.
TVJ Sports understands that having midweek competitions could be an option should the weekend lockdowns continue beyond this coming weekend. But J3's General Secretary Marie Tavares confirmed on Tuesday afternoon no word has yet been received from the Ministry of Local Government under which the disaster risk management protocols fall. Karen Madden, TVJ Sports.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Shane Masters. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.